Welcome to the SpiritWoke Podcast, podcasting from the beautiful city of Stillwater, the birthplace of Minnesota. Are you going through a spiritual awakening? Do you wish to learn more about continued spiritual growth and want to meet others who are on a similar journey? We hope that this podcast and its community can be a meaningful resource for you. The SpiritWoke Podcast welcomes special guests from around the globe who share personal stories of their awakening journey, along with details of spiritual abilities they've developed along the way. So buckle up and get ready for this exciting episode. And now, here's your host, Adam Dins.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to the SpiritWoke Podcast. On this episode, we'll be speaking with Dr. Elias Druckman. Dr. Druckman has earned both a medical degree and a doctorate in chiropractic. He has completed several postgraduate programs, including the Complete 800 series and traumatic brain injury modules from the Carrick Institute. He holds a Diplomate in neurology from the American Chiropractic Neurology Board. Dr. Druckman strives to both optimize brain function and rehabilitate fundamental brain issues such as trauma, delays in brain development, and brain degeneration. That being said, today we're not here to talk medicine. We're here to have some real talk about spirituality. So Elias, welcome to the SpiritWoke Podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, Adam.
Excellent. I know a little bit of background for those of you who are listening in. Elias and I actually went to high school together, and not just high school, but we went to a performing arts high school together. And Elias and I became friends and really bonded over our love of magic. Elias is a phenomenal close-up magician, and he was, at least back in high school, I'm not sure if you're still doing it, Elias, but you were a really talented mime.
Well, yeah, that's been a few years, but I do miss it sometimes. I do have fantasies of maybe just going on the streets and doing some pantomime for fun.
Yeah, I hear that. You know, it's interesting as I kind of pick up those sometimes those hobbies that I had as a child. It just kind of brings me back to those days, you know. And then there's sort of this duality of, oh, this is so much fun, I really miss this. And then there's the, hey, you know what? I'm maybe a little bit too old to be pulling string out of a kid's ear.
Yeah, no, you're never too old for that.
Fair enough. That's a mantra I have to keep telling myself. Yeah. Adam, you're not too old to do that. But no, you're right. I don't know about you, Elias, but and maybe it's the nature of just our kind of personalities and the things that we've always kind of been drawn to and interested in. But I just feel as young today as I ever have.
Yeah, I've always felt like an old man trapped in a young man's body, but now I am an old man in an old man's body. But maybe if we take it to mean more of an old soul, then I can gain some points with that. But it depends on the day. But you know, these hobbies and things that keep you young are really important. You know, and it's important to have the diversion, especially if especially in my work, it can get very serious, and you want to avoid that at all costs of being overly serious. You know, you've got to find that good balance between the whimsical and the serious.
That's really interesting. Elias, there's a question I wanted to start off asking you, but since you mentioned kind of keeping a light heart and being, good sense of humor and kind of lighthearted, let's start there. I want to ask you a question because this is something that's weighed on my mind and has been for a little while, and I just wanted to get your take on it. So I've kind of found that in sort of the spiritual community that we live in, because we do, right? We do have a tribe. Mm-hmm. That is a very serious tribe in a lot of ways. And, my personality is, similar to yours. It is very lighthearted, and I like to joke around. And I found that sometimes it can be hard to find that in this community. Everyone seems to be really serious. I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people just are really serious about things. Have you noticed that at all?
Yeah, I have. In my world, which is sort of a medical chiropractic and I haven't really been much into a spiritual community. I do a lot of my spiritual stuff alone and in meditation. But what I have noticed anyway in in the chiropractic community, there's a technique known as network spinal analysis, and this is as as spiritual, I think, as chiropractic can get. It's a very I guess it would be considered a lot like Reiki, where there's a lot of hands-off kind of approach and energy work to it. And I found I absolutely love it, and I absolutely adore studying it. But when I go to the when I go to the seminars, I just find that there's what I like to call a right brain ego. So you have your left brain egos that I feel like I can deal with the left brain egos that are very you just didn't study the material, so you don't know anything, kind of. And I'm like, okay, fine. I can be lighthearted about that. But like the right brain ego, when you get into spirituality, is kind of like from the perspective of oh, you're just not ready yet for that piece of information. It's the assumption that I'm enlightened, but you're just not quite ready yet for it. If you're frustrated, or even if you take yourself too lightly. That too is like, oh, if you're not taking this too serious enough, it's you're obviously not ready yet. You're in the process of discovering yourself, and that's fine, and that's good to be at. But and that's the type of thing where, like, don't judge me. I've been around as well. I spend the time sitting and doing nothing just as much as you do.
And I found that to be the case too in a lot of different areas of life, and maybe it's just the way that I've just approached things. But I always find, and I I've been into this sort of spiritual awakening process now for, granted it started slowly many years ago, back in 2005, but it really just kind of kicked into high gear back in the beginning of 2018. But I often found when I begin to immerse myself in new things that I almost feel to some extent like I need to hold back on my sense of humor or lack thereof. Like it just doesn't naturally come out. I tend to be very serious and very kind of like on point for a while. And then once I start to get comfortable and feel a little bit more, comfortable in my skin, if you will, I tend to lighten up a bit, and then my personality starts coming out a little bit more. And what I've also found too is that when that does happen, it affects, and call it a vibration, right? It tends to affect the room or the group of people that I'm around, and all of a sudden people tend to start coming out of that serious sort of mindset that they're in.
Yeah, I mean, the saying is the angels have wings because they take themselves lightly. I think holds true in that, if you can, there's enough to get bogged down in the seriousness of things. Now that said, there is a balance there that has to be there. That you have the Zen masters that will beat you with a stick if you're in your meditation, you move a little bit or you nod your head like you're falling asleep. You have to watch. Even in meditation, that you don't fall asleep. So you have to constantly be alert and be watching. But at the same time, you can get overly serious as well. So finding that nice, and that's kind of what, in a way, what meditation is finding that nice. You're riding that wave of both, seriousness and lightheartedness, of thinking and non-thinking, of being here and then somewhere else. You're kind of trying to ride that crest of that wave that's sort of right on the cusp of those two things.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, that was a fun derivation of what we're going to talk about today. Yeah. But I think it was important, and that's good conversation.
Yeah.
So, Elias, I typically ask the guests on our show this first question just because I like to have a baseline for people to kind of compare our guests' experiences, just for a more well-rounded perspective. But I'd be honored, Elias, if you tell our listeners a little bit about your awakening, maybe what sparked it, and talk a little bit about what the journey's been like for you.
Yeah, and I like the term awakening, and with the emphasis on the ing part of it, because, to even come close to say that I've awakened is nowhere even close to the truth. I find that it's an awakening, and what are we awakening from is basically unconsciousness. And there are different levels to consciousness. I think that there are moments where I'm completely unconscious. There are moments where I have of and unfortunately far and few between where I feel like that I'm as close as I can get to the awakening process and pure bliss. And usually that's after a weekend long meditation gathering on heart meditation. For some reason, heart meditation really works for me. Getting into the heart and getting into the deep loving kindness emotions really helps me get centered. But to take me back, I guess you would say I've always been, quote unquote, a seeker, to use a very cliche phrase. But it's true, is that I'm never, there's dissatisfaction with often what is being told to me has been around since as far as I can remember. I was raised in the Jewish religion, and there are things that I absolutely align with and absolutely agree with. I didn't like the self-deprecation stuff of it, of, we're not worthy, we're not, in your presence. And it's kind of, I never felt that God wanted us to subserve so much, in that respect. So there are things that I disagreed with. And then my path took me to, I've done midnight mass in the Vatican. I embraced Islam for about 10 years. I was a pretty devout Muslim. I would pray 5 times a day. I never did the trip to Mecca, but I did all the other pillars, fasted for Ramadan and everything like that. And that gave me some structure, I would say. But at the same time, it left me unfulfilled because I felt that was enhancing some of that spiritual ego that you can, that's a slippery slope that you can say, well, I'm saved, quote unquote, and now I just have to worry about everybody else. And then that kind of will stifle you from your own awakening and your own spiritual journey. So through Islam, I got into the poetry of Rumi and Sufism, which is the mystical aspect of Islam. And then from there, I re-embraced Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah. And from there, I embraced Christian mysticism of Gnosticism. And from there, I got into the Hermetic wisdom. And that's what I'm kind of into these days, is the Kabbalion, which is where Kabbalah, a lot of Kabbalah comes from. But these are all kind of saying the same thing. That's the mysticism, I should say, from ancient Egypt. But a lot of this is all saying the same thing, that we're all one. This is all one thing. If your religion is serving to divide you and making you feel superior to somebody else that's not part of the religion, or even superior to somebody else that's in the religion, I would say drop it. It doesn't serve you. But if it's causing you to embrace others and to see the similarities, then I would say bring it on, because that's helping you along the journey. And now, I don't want this to sound like a one love hippy dippy thing, but in the reality is that even in quantum mechanics, it is all one thing. There is a oneness to it all. There is no real separation between what's perceived as things. This perception all comes from the brain of your material reality. It's a construct of your brain's perception, and really a hallucination of separateness, which is fine, which is important, because that's how we discern things, is through contrast. But is it the true nature of reality? Probably not. So religion should guide us at least to the true nature of reality, so that we can see what's beyond the physical senses. So that's been the heart of my journey anyway, is that I've tried to learn as much as possible about the human brain, and what is this that makes us tick? And, are we just automatons of emotion? Or do we have control, or some sort of control over these things? Can we manifest our dreams? Can we co-create our own reality? And that's been my question and answer for at least the past 10 years.
Every time we talk, Elias, and you kind of share a little of, and I'll call it your spiritual wisdom, I find that I'm able to understand things a lot better and a lot more clearly, and I read a lot, and there are some concepts in books that I read through, and I feel like I either feel like I get them or I half get them, and then I talk to you and you just kind of mention the topic in passing, and it's like, oh, that's what that meant. Now I get it. Now it's clear. So thank you for that that answer. That was really great. Question, or observation / question. So I've kind of found too, and you and I have been on not a similar journey per se, but I too changed religions from what my family's religion, what I was born into in Judaism. I became a Christian in high school, as you remember, and followed that path for many years, and then eventually, just kind of left that, and it wasn't too long after that I started to awaken consciously to what you were speaking about, just becoming more aware. And so but what's interesting and what you mentioned in your previous answer is it seems like it can be, and this is no knock on any religion, this is more of just maybe an observation on humanity in general, is that it does seem easy for us as humans to be drawn to things that do focus on separation, on that duality.
Yeah. There's comfort in it. You find your tribe. There is biological reasons for it. There are evolutionary reasons for it. We are tribal creatures. This is how we are in our monkey mind and our monkey bodies. It makes sense for survival's sake. But and for some people they need that, and I don't want to knock that as well. I mean, having your tribe and really communion with other people in your tribe is a good thing. I mean, that can be very rewarding. For me, and I don't think the path of the mystic is for everybody. And there are some days where I do feel like I need more structure. And in mysticism, there often lacks a lot of structure. Modern mysticism. I mean, there were times where you had these mystic groups like students of Gurdjieff, who would do very ritualistic dances, and they followed very strict ritual. I think that therein lies where in the mystic path the ritual is so important, because it gives you some of that structure. But organized religion gives you that structure, has plenty of ritual. You can commune with your fellow members of that culture. You share things in common. It's very comforting, and some people need that comfort, and it's important. But will it ultimately? It's a double-edged sword. In that comfort, be like a teddy bear, and in reality, we shouldn't look at. In my opinion, we shouldn't look at God as a teddy bear, because you're missing some of the majesty, and you're missing some of the majesty within as well. Is it scary? Is it sometimes the path of the mystic is going off the edge of a cliff and into an abyss? Absolutely. But sometimes I feel that the rewards are higher than if you were to just go for the comfort. And we know that to be true in everyday life. Often we spend our whole lives striving after comfort and ease, and we never seem to actually get there. And then you hear about these multi-millionaires and billionaires that just are unfulfilled once they never actually get to the place where they feel like they have enough. But once that they get to a point where all of their needs are met, they feel unfulfilled, and they'll start to go on these spiritual journeys, like Steve Jobs, for example. Going to India and reading the Yogananda books. So you're never really there. And that's why I like when you said awakening, that we really emphasize the ing part of it, is that you're kind of just getting ready to be ready to be ready to be ready. Just it's an ongoing thing, and that's what I think is the true nature of the universe, is that we're here to improve on what's come before us, and then we kind of go back into the fold and do it all over again. And I do believe in, I guess you would say, reincarnation. Even though I don't talk about it very much, I do believe in reincarnation in such that that we're all kind of on the leading edge of this creation. Improving on what has come before us. And that's the purpose of being in the world, of contrast, of being in the world where the material world where there appears duality, and there appears the other, and there appears other people, and which the true nature of reality is that we are all one. It is all one thing, but it's important for us to have that contrast right now so that we can improve on what's come before us. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the biggest shifts for me, Elias, and I don't know how, and I can't say I've shifted yet, as you continue to articulate the ing and awakening, right? But one of the things that's been the biggest struggle for me, I think, has been my past religious upbringing / training, and sort of having that desire to look outward for God, right? Mm-hmm. And for spirit. And, I even find sometimes when I meditate, and I'm getting better at it. It's a slow process though, because it's essentially reprogramming belief systems, right? But even when I meditate and I talk to God or Source or the universe, however folks listening identify with that energy. But what I find myself thinking myself into outer space, into the universe, and I have to remind myself that no, wait, everything is one. Everything is everything, and that is within me. And the moments where I find I'm able to go inside and not look for things outside, the happier I am, and the more fulfilled I am. And I think you really hit on that with your discussion around people who seem to have it all, that they strive after, money, and they work and they grind, and, they seek more and more and more, but they're never happy once they get there. And it's sort of that focus on the external. Like, if I just get that one more thing, then I'll be happy. And you get there and it's like, wait a minute, that didn't fulfill me. And I think a lot of that is because what fulfills us is what's inside. It's what we've always been. We were born into this life fulfilled, but as human beings, we've learned to feel unfulfilled. And so part of that awakening process is remembering who we were when we first came here in that pure soul spirit form.
Yeah, for sure. It helps. But it's also partly true that God, or whatever you want to call it, is outside in the material world. But it's kind of like, I would think it's like the surface of the wave on the ocean, and the depth of it, you're only looking at that, but there's a depth that, of inward searching, like you're saying, that goes so much deeper. But I wouldn't necessarily ignore the surface either, because it's all good. And, I think you can, it's rare in our society, but I think it's possible to reach a state of spiritual awakening through materialism. Osho is a mystic teacher from India. He died in 1990. His manifesto is often very much enriched in materialism. He had 99 Rolls Royces and these types of things. But, he had always said that at any moment he could just drop them. It's not like, he said it's good to have nice things. Really, it's a good thing. But it's, at any moment, if you can just drop it and you're still there, you're unaffected, then you've figured it out. But I think that you can enjoy all of the material things, sensuality, all of these things that are often looked at as anti-spiritual can be, like sex, for example, can be used as a tool to enhance your spiritual awakening.
Absolutely. And, I think there's a key difference, and love to hear your opinion on this, Elias, of those people who do achieve material success and derive joy from it versus those that don't feel fulfilled. And it's really the mindset and how we approach those things. So I like Eckhart Tolle's sort of take on the fact that, when you align with your inner purpose, it becomes easier to find your outer purpose because the universe guides you, and then things start to manifest. And that when you do things and when you approach things spirit-led, and let the universe guide you, when you sort of find the fruits of that labor and the fruits of those things, you get joy from it, but you're not attaching yourself to it. You're not attached to it. It's not necessarily part of your identity. So you're able to enjoy it while it's there. But if it goes away, it's okay because it was there for a time. And so I think part of it, and again, love to hear your thoughts on it, isn't necessarily based in attachment or identification with it, but just enjoying it for what it is.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm saying, that I can see that from afar as still a student in all of this. That's a very difficult lesson for me, for everybody, for all of us. If you can do that, then absolutely, but sometimes that does take, you have to have it, you have to have it and then lose it and then maybe get it again in order to learn these lessons, in order to really make that true for you. Now, I think that can be true for some. For some people, they can sit on the top of a mountain and meditate and come to that realization. But even, you look at Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, had all of the material wealth given to him and all of the luxuries of life given to him, and he went and on his own spiritual journey and saw the truth of suffering and dropped it on his own. Now, if he had born not the son of a king, but born to a beggar, would he have ever reached enlightenment? And you will never know, but I don't think so. So I think that part of this path is maybe being enriched in materialism, in these rich, loving relationships, and then having them leave us, and then seeing the suffering that goes along with that. I think that can also be a path. It's not an easy one, and it's one that I struggle with, obviously, of loss and or perception of loss, and perception of even perception of having something, and then when you have it again, the ability to not covet it, and the ability to know that it's still all of it is just temporary, is what I struggle with. And I wouldn't say struggle, but it is the lesson that I'm learning now.
Yeah, that's powerful, and there's so much truth in that, Elias. And I feel too, in addition to that, there are those of us, and I'll just speak candidly about myself, that for most of my adult life, I've struggled, and I'll use that word because it's a real word, with understanding what my purpose in life is, and for me, the materialism of it is really more in that root chakra area of just, having my needs met, knowing, because I didn't grow up in a well-to-do household, and my dad, as you know, he was a jazz musician, and jazz musicians weren't wealthy, or not unless you made it big in the industry. And so for me, from a materialist perspective, and through the spiritual awakening, I feel like I've overcome this aspect, at least for now, has been the fear of losing everything that I have and not having anything, because been there before and don't want that to happen again. I feel like I've come away there, but my biggest struggle has been sort of that yearning to find my purpose. And again, I'm just so grateful to this spiritual journey, because one of the realizations that I've come to, one of the things that I feel has really resonated with me and has sunk in, that I've gotten, is that the journey is now. It's in the present. It's being here, and it's being focused on the present moment, and not worrying about the future, and not thinking too far ahead in the future, and not wanting for things in the future, but just trusting that whatever happens, if I'm aligned with my inner self, with my inner purpose, that my outer purpose will manifest. And but I know from a spiritual struggle perspective, there's some people who know what they're meant to do from the day that they come into this, come to the planet, right? Like there are people who I know who have been like, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up, or I'm going to be a lawyer, or I'm going to be this, and they've just been laser focused, and they go through and do it. Me, I don't know. I've just kind of fallen into everything that I've done professionally. And I'm okay with that now. I didn't used to be okay with that because I kind of felt like I was kind of ad-libbing life.
Mm-hmm.
But, I still do feel like I'm ad-libbing life, but it's no longer a struggle for me because I really do believe that being, as centered as I possibly can be and continuing this awakening process, that I'm not as worried anymore about it, and I have a lot more trust.
Yeah, and it's fun. Ad-libbing is fun. Improv is fun. You get up, we used to do that in high school. You get up on stage and you don't know what's going to come out of your mouth, and the audience is there and they're waiting, and you have to perform, and you gotta bring it. And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. But sometimes that's way more fun than even going up on stage with the script completely memorized and you have it down by rote memory, and you're just kind of the automaton. Improv is way more alive, and that's something that I miss, and I miss it for that reason. But like you said, if this is your life, you feel like you're ad-libbing, I think that's a noble journey and a noble purpose, and that you have the guts to go with the flow. It's
almost like jazz, right? When you get to that improv.
Yep.
Yeah. And sometimes the improvisation is more beautiful than the sheet music itself.
It is, and that's where new stuff comes from. That's where the new things come about from that. And I do think that is the ultimate purpose as to why we're here, is to bring something new, is that to improve on creation over and over and over and over, because that's how it just keeps getting better and better. Now, I mean, you could probably look at the world and say it doesn't appear that things are getting better. But in reality, human beings are living infinitely better than they have been in the past. And it is getting better, and I wouldn't, it may be controversial, but I wouldn't worry too much about our impact on the planet. The planet is very resilient and can bounce back with anything that we throw at it in a negative sense. But I think that I do have hope for humanity. I feel like we will figure it out through technology. I hope that we'll be able to raise our spiritual awareness enough to where the technology doesn't consume us, and that we're able to use it in appropriate and mature means.
Absolutely. And something you said really resonated with me about, and I felt this way too, about Earth and nature just being so resilient. I recall a moment when I was much younger. My dad and I were walking down a sidewalk, and coming out of the sidewalk was like a little plant, like not a plant, but like a leaf, like one strand of grass was popping through the sidewalk, and the sidewalk was cracked in that area. And I remember my dad, we were holding hands walking, and he looked down and he said, "Do you see that, Adam?" And he pointed to the grass. I said, "Yeah." And he said, "It doesn't matter what man does. Earth, nature will always be stronger and always be able to overcome." And it was so powerful. And I remember that moment. It's got to be over 30 years ago, Elias. Now here I go dating myself, but but I've always remembered that. I always think of the Earth that way, and I get it, like, because I feel like I should be more concerned about the current state of our environmental, what's going on with the environment, and you see those pictures of what the trash is doing in the ocean, and it's heartbreaking. And I feel like I should worry more, but I hear my dad's voice in my mind on a regular basis saying, "Don't worry. Earth is strong, and there's nothing that we can do as humans that will be able to destroy it, because if anything, the Earth will overtake us instead."
Yeah, that is the more likely outcome.
So maybe that's just us making humanity, in our egoic mind, more powerful than it really is.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is.
So, Elias, I wanted to touch on one more topic here before we close out. This has been so much fun. So in talking with people who are going through spiritual awakening, there seems to be this similar process or similar thread. And I speak for myself too, as I ask this question. When we first start on this awakening journey, there tends to be this whole new sense of excitement and possibility. Like for me, when I really first started digging into meditation, I just felt like I was on cloud 9, and I was telling everybody about how amazing and all the benefits, and everyone should meditate. You should take 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes at night to meditate. But then there seems to be this plateauing effect after, a while, where you get to a place and it just seems like a slug, like you're just pushing through. And that initial excitement, that initial energy seems to not be as strong as it was in the beginning. And sometimes it's easy to look at others who are going through their spiritual awakening, maybe a little bit further down the road, in their evolution, if you will, and it's easy to compare ourselves and say, wow, look at, from a mystic perspective, right? Wow, look at what that person is able to conjure up from their spirituality, and here I am sitting in my meditation chair trying to get thoughts out of my head. What's going on? And there seems to be this ebb and flow. There's again, I've experienced both of those things. So after that plateau, there's the excitement again, and then it almost seems like there's maybe more growth after you get past that, and those areas of plateauing. But have you experienced that, Elias? And if so, how have you kind of worked on overcoming that?
Yeah, I mean, I have, but not quite in the exact way, because I think I've always known from the start that, and my advice, if I were to give any advice here, would be the only advice I would give is the only issue here is the other people, looking at the other and seeing their, and it's true for spiritual progress. It's true for progress in your field. I mean, there's people that in my field that are just absolutely brilliant, and they're far ahead of me in terms of neurological rehab. And there are two ways to go about it. I can be, envious, and I'm not going to lie. Those I'm a human being. Those feelings do come up. But what do you do with that then? Are you serious about it, or are you lighthearted about it? And that's where being lighthearted really comes in handy. Is that if you're lighthearted about this, and you say, "Oh, look at them," and you really are genuinely happy for them, and you really are you see them as one and the same, is that you're in this thing together, and look what they're able to do. Look how they're improving on humanity. Maybe I can do that. Maybe I need to buckle down and study, or maybe from a spiritual standpoint, maybe I need to be meditating a little bit more regularly than I have been. So those can be wake-up calls, if you use them right, or they can lead to frustration and resentment, and then you put down your meditation pillow, and you don't do anything for 2 months, and then there's a quote by Rumi, "Come, yet again come," where he's talking about just come back to it. Just, you're a lover of leaving, but just come back. And that's, for whatever reason, I always have that poem in the back of my head when it's been a while that I haven't meditated. And usually for me, what drives it is not so much gusto of I'm so excited about meditation. It's usually a tragedy or something, shakes me to my core, or a really emergency type situation. Those are the ones that get me back to sitting in meditation again, when really it's got to be during the rainy days and the sunny days, so that you have that place to go to that's outside of conditions, that's outside of the conditions of the rain and the sunshine. And if it's sunny over there, over this other guy, and it's raining where you are, you just got to know that eventually the clouds move, and eventually the weather changes, and the whole climate can change too. And enlightenment, actual, true enlightenment, which I do think that there are enlightened masters. There are not as many as there would that there are quote unquote enlightened masters claim to be, but there have been. Look at Jesus and Buddha and these in our past. I think Osho was an enlightened master, and then you can think that a lot of times their enlightenment happened in just a blink of an eye, in just a second. Buddha was sitting under the Bodhi tree. He had heard the story goes he had heard a statement about playing a stringed instrument, that if it's too tight, it's going to break. If it's too loose, it's not going to play. It has to be just right. And that's what did it. And then all of a sudden an explosion happened. And then he was one with all that is, and he finally knew he was there, And so that can happen in just an instant. So you can feel like you are so far away, but at any moment, anything can happen. And that's the beautiful thing. You just got to get ready to be ready to be ready.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I really love that, the way you phrase that, and it reminds me. When I first started going through Reiki training, I asked her similar questions. My Reiki master, I'd asked her similar questions about, just kind of spiritual growth and even from the mystic side, because I've always been really fascinated by the mystic side of spirituality, and in fact, I think it's because shortly after my dad passed, I spoke to a psychic medium that connected with my dad and was able to communicate with him, and it just kind of blew my mind. And I was like, wow. And as I kind of came more into the awakening process, like, you mean, I just thought that was for some people, but the fact that everybody, could experience this form of mysticism, to your point, is what Buddha would say, the more attuned your string is, right? And it was interesting because as I was speaking with my Reiki master about this, she goes, Adam, we are where we are, and we are where we're supposed to be, and the universe gives us what we're ready for, and so we just need to be present, and I've just found that to be so helpful in my spiritual journey. I found earlier on in my spiritual journey, maybe I compared myself to other people a lot more than I do now. But now I've really learned to be at peace with where I am, and to really embrace and be grateful for the journey, and to, just approach it with childlike wonder. And I love your take, or not your take, but just your perspective on things can happen in an instant, right? Because a lot of times that's the way our own awakening experience happens, right? Like the initial awakening is something just clicks, and you sort of go from this unconscious to conscious state. Yeah.
And then you can go back to unconscious, and that's okay too.
Yes.
It can be like an alarm clock, and then they say you go back to sleep dreaming of alarm clocks. So sometimes we need more and more sophisticated alarm clocks to keep us going and to keep it fresh. It's hard to keep a meditation technique or your spiritual path. It's hard to keep it fresh. You talk about these, they talk about these in any religion. You have your maybe your 10 prayers that you go every Sunday and you say the exact same thing, and it's in the same way. How do you keep that fresh? And it's important to do that. Some people are really able to do that, and it's a very a Zen approach to it. But it's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like that. I think Eckhart Tolle was speaking about that in A New Earth, where it's much harder to stay present when you're in the same environment every day. So for instance, if when you go on vacation and you're going someplace that you've never been, it's really easy to be constantly aware and present, because you're seeing new things for the first time, and you're absorbing it. But if you're in your house or your office or wherever it is, you sort of just get used to it, and so it's easy to let the mind wander, and it's easy to sort of lose focus there.
Yeah, so that's a good technique. Is you just do walking meditation. Each step you're taking through your house is very, very deliberate, and then you're just looking at each object as if you're looking at it for the first time. That's a really good technique that I haven't done in a while. Maybe I'll do that today.
I had never thought of that before, but I'm going to try that today too. It's funny how we think about being perceived to some extent, because, you know, when you go through an awakening, a lot of people don't understand what you're going through, and it's easy to sort of feel like the odd one out. But, you know, there have been moments where I'm with a group of people or a person, and I'll see a tree, and I'll just stare at the tree and, you know, imagine it without form, and try to connect with the tree and just sort of like be at one with it, you know, and I see the looks that people like, why is he staring at that tree like that? Why did he just go off into this daze, you know? But I think it's important to not get in that mindset, and to be able to do those types of meditations like you just mentioned, and be creative and let spirit guide you, and really just be present.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can't, you know, the looks of the other people, you know, just realize that, you know, the other is still, not the true nature of reality. It's the other is, important, and the other is, you know, in this time and space, in this kind of construct that we're in, is extremely important. It gives us contrast. It allows us to know what we want and what we don't want. But the other really doesn't exist on the deepest level. You know, if you always keep that in the back of your head, then that helps.
That's a great point, Elias. Well, hey, Elias, this has been an incredible conversation. I'm so grateful for your time. I'm grateful for your friendship for over the many years, and I couldn't be more honored to have you on the podcast here.
Well, likewise, Adam. Thank you for having me, and I hope you know, our words you know, have reached some people, and that they enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed being on the show, so thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, that is Dr. Elias Druckman. You can find him currently at thedruckmancenter.com, and learn more about Dr. Druckman on the podcast page. As the episode is published, you'll find lots of great information there. So again, thank you, Elias, and until next time, take care of each other and take care of yourselves.
Thanks for listening to the SpiritWoke Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to check out our website, spiritwoke.com, and connect with the SpiritWoke community on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search SpiritWoke. Join us next time for another edition of the SpiritWoke Podcast. Namaste.